All right. For the GWU policies, the users must complete training. You must complete our training to have access to the REDCap GWU instance. After training, the users must complete the account approval survey, and this survey just kind of just collects some information about our users, and it's kind of an agreement that you will use REDCap in good faith. And after users completes the survey, their REDCap account will be in good standing. If it's not completed after, let's say within 14 days, then we'll probably place a suspension on your account, and then you will have to reach out to the team to have us lift that suspension. The eligibility and training, to be eligible for the REDCap instance, you have to be affiliated with GWU or Children's National. In the future, we will have a login from where people can log in from different institutions if you're collaborating with them on a project. So that will be available in the future. The training requirements, which is attend the REDCap one-on-one training online. The in-person is to be determined right now. In the training, you have to complete the questionnaires, exercises, and the online screencast. For GW policies for the PI is responsible for making sure that the IRB has approved or exempted studies of human subjects before the data collection. And they also have to maintain the user rights within the project, which we would go over in the walkthrough, and remove users from a project when they no longer are working on it. And notify that REDCap support team when a user leaves, so we may remove that user from our database also.
Okay, the next thing that I want to go over are the two different types of instruments that you can have within a REDCap project. Sometimes you'll also hear me or other members refer to these as forms, so either forms or instruments. The first type of form we'll talk about are case report forms, and this is really the default instrument type within REDCap. With a case report form, the user has to have a REDCap account and have access to a project, and they're going to log into REDCap and directly key data in to the project and enter it all through REDCap. And there's a number of different examples of this that are used across project types. The other type of instrument is a survey. In this case, you will send a web link to participants for them to enter data online, and the user in this case will not be logging in to REDCap. The person taking the survey probably has never heard of REDCap. This is just a study subject or a participant in your survey that's going to be filling out the survey. This is sort of similar to something like SurveyMonkey. There's a bunch of different survey options. So you could have a public URL that all participants go to, or you can use some REDCap features to email a unique URL to specific participants. And in that case, you can do a little bit more tracking about who has responded and who hasn't, and send them reminders. There's also, these surveys can be identified or anonymous. There's a participant identifier function for tracking responses. You can again set up some automated notifications to track responses, and you can also use REDCap to manage and compose all of your email invitations. So some examples of surveys are the REDCap account request form that you'll fill out at the end of this, the REDCap training evaluation survey, or if you signed up for this class using the online training registration form, that was also a REDCap survey. So in all of those cases, you never have to log into REDCap to fill out your survey. It's somebody created the survey by logging into REDCap, but then they're just emailing a link to people to open to fill it out. So you can have a mix of these instruments in a project. So a project could be all case report forms, all surveys, or some combination of the two. And they can be used interchangeably. Again, everything really starts out in REDCap as a case report form. Then with just a couple clicks, you could turn any case report form into a survey, and I'll show you how to do that later. There's also another sort of difference in studies or in forms, and that's whether the study is cross-sectional, where you are looking at different groups within a population, or a longitudinal study where you're going to be comparing the same subject at multiple times. So both of these are available. These study options are available in REDCap. And in fact, any form can be selected, or any instrument can be selected to be kind of either one of these. So you can have an instrument repeat multiple times so that you can look at changes over time. That could be within a project that has some forms that repeat and some forms that don't. So for instance, you might do an initial physical exam for somebody, and then you might send them, monthly follow-up surveys about certain health outcomes. That's just one example of how you'd have a physical exam as a single case report form, and then you'd have a longitudinal element of these monthly surveys that would repeat at multiple times. Again, this is all really project dependent, and these things can all be mixed and matched within a REDCap project. You can also have multiple REDCap projects, and so I typically think of a project as being a single kind of cohesive study unit. So if you're wanting to relate a lot of data between different forms for the same study subjects, I would typically group all of those forms into a single project. But if you might be working on one study looking at inhaler usage among asthmatics in DC, and then you might be looking at a very different subject that's more regional or across the whole country, or is looking at specific forms of medical intervention. Those may exist as separate projects or could be nested within the same project. It'll just depend on how you need to relate those different pieces of information to each other. Typically, if that information doesn't need to be very tightly related, I would say group them as separate projects, just so you have each project as kind of a discrete unit, a discrete study. Okay, now I just want to quickly go over the different types of fields that you can build into your REDCap project. And then we're going to go ahead and log into REDCap and start using these. So the way that the vast majority of our users build their REDCap projects is by using the online designer, and that's what I'm showing a screenshot of here. This is a drag and drop menu builder to create a new project or a new instrument from the ground up. So you do this by just adding a field, and so you would say I want to add a new field, and then you would select your field type, and the field types are, all the different field types are shown here. On the next slide I'm going to give you some examples of these. Here's some common field types. So the first here, radio buttons. This is sort of your classic kind of online exam type question. You also have a drop down list. This is encoding the same information as the radio buttons, just in a slightly different format. You have checkboxes similar to the radio buttons, but they allow multiple answers to be selected. Probably the most commonly used form is a text box, so this accepts raw text. But you could set a text box to have a variety of validations. So this same text box with a date validation would look like this. All of a sudden the calendar icon appears. This is clickable, so somebody could click on this, pop up a calendar to select the date. The today button also appears in case you're asking for today's date. That's just a little shortcut. If people click that, it will fill in the date. There's also an option to add a matrix of fields. Here I'm just showing a quick example. A classic example of a matrix would be these, strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree questions. Whoops, let me go back. So strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. These are often done in a matrix. The difference between a matrix and a normal field is that in a matrix, the answer choices are always identical within a matrix. So you have a field here, and then all of these choices. You could have a much simpler matrix. For instance, you could do true or false questions as a matrix. That just makes things a little bit easier on the user experience side, because it tends to be a little bit faster for people to work down a column. To say, think about when you're coming back to the US, if you've been traveling abroad, and you fill out the customs and immigration form, and you just go down typically you go down the list saying, no, I'm not bringing any agricultural products, no, I haven't, been exposed to snails or things like that, and you just work your way down the list saying yes or no, true or false. So the matrices can be a little bit faster for a user to work through.
All right, let's now log in to REDCap. This link should be also located in the training right here. Just click on it and it should take you to the GWU REDCap instance.